Deterrence, that's the word dominating in Iran now after the most intense war the country has experienced since the guns fell silent in the Iran-Iraq War. In the past few weeks, several high-ranking officials of the country have been killed, including the former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Aside from the loss of an important leader, Iran's military strength has also suffered significant damage. According to Reuters, American intelligence believes that almost half of Iran's drone and missile stockpile has already been destroyed by the United States and Israel. And this does not yet include the missiles that Iran itself launched in its attacks against America and its allies. And of course, there's also the impact on the economy. Since the war began, the combined forces have systematically targeted Iran's infrastructure and industries, causing damage amounting to $1.01 trillion. According to analysts from Chatham House, Iran's GDP could shrink by 10% because of the war. So if you think about how much worse Iran's situation is now compared to before, their officials have to face a simple question. Could this have been avoided? And the bad news for the supporters? For non-proliferation, or the idea that dangerous regimes shouldn't have superweapons, there was actually a simple way Iran could have prevented the attack, a method proven effective by their fellow pariah state, North Korea, and that is nuclear weapons. And what's truly frightening about this decade is that it seems to prove that the only real deterrence is the one built in the shadow of a nuclear explosion. But before we begin, if you're new to our channel, make sure to subscribe so you'll always be updated with videos like this. Nuclear dream. We often hear the phrase Iran's nuclear ambitions, as if it's something they definitely want to acquire. Nuclear weapons. But there was a time when even Iran's supreme leader said that they had no intention of doing this. In an interview, former President Hassan shared that Khamenei said, "No, we are not considering nuclear weapons. I've said it many times, our real weapon is this nation. Our weapon is the youth. We don't need nuclear weapons." Rouhani added that he told the foreign ministers of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom that declaration is more important to Iran than the nuclear non-proliferation treaty itself. It's an international agreement aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons. And most likely your reaction to this would be, of course, he would say that. And yes, it's also possible that it's all deception, but there are reasons to believe that Iran is really hesitant to actually build a nuclear bomb. According to the Atlantic Council, Khamenei has previously called the use of nuclear weapons haram, or forbidden in Islam. And this is supported by many Iranians, based on surveys showing that they oppose the development of such weapons. This declaration has also been recognized internationally as a fatwa, a religious opinion in Islam that provides guidance on law and morality. Because it comes from the highest religious leader in Iran, it is expected to influence state policy. But this is where the tension began. According to the report, there was a conflict between Khamenei and the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, because some high-ranking officials wanted to withdraw the fatwa. For them, this is the answer to the growing threat from the West. According to one official, after Donald Trump was re-elected, Iran has never been this weak. And eventually that warning proved to be correct. The IRGC's fears reflect Iran's long-standing calculations. The regime understands that making a nuclear bomb would almost certainly provoke a direct attack from Washington and Jerusalem. But instead of crossing that line completely, they chose to stay close but not cross it, and used what is called strategic ambiguity. This means they do not clearly show how close they are to making a nuclear weapon. In this way, they are able to create fear or deterrence without having to face the weight of the political and military consequences of openly declaring a nuclear arsenal. At the same time, Iran also relied on their network of proxy forces. They built a system using armed groups not directly controlled by the state, which served as a kind of insurance policy. For example, if Iran were to take drastic measures, such as closing the Strait of Hormuz, their allied groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis in Yemen could act to pressure Israel and threaten American bases and its allies throughout the region. This is combined with Iran's vast arsenal of missiles and drones, which has now been proven to be even larger than previously thought, and with its nuclear infrastructure, which has nearly reached the point of producing weapons. All of this has formed what analysts at the Belfer Center call the layered deterrence model, a system that gives Iran the ability to expand its influence while avoiding direct war. This strategy has another benefit. Iran uses its nuclear progress as a bargaining chip in negotiations, while avoiding the severe isolation that would come from actually making a nuclear bomb. By 2023, Iran had more than 400 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%, which is just a little short of reaching weapons-grade level and being able to produce several warheads. Although in reality, the process of making an actual weapon is more complicated than what is often shown in the media. But now this careful system has collapsed. According to Nikolai Grahowski of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Iran wants the benefits of having a nuclear weapon without actually making one. And they also want to gain power through their proxy network without carefully managing it. And this system started to collapse even before the current war. Israel systematically weakened Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon after the attacks on October 7. Meanwhile, the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria cut off important supply routes that supported these groups. So when the joint air campaign by America and Israel began in February, Iran was almost exposed. An even more damaging truth is that being a threshold state is not enough to be safe. According to Professor Mohammed Ayub, remaining in this state offers no guarantee of security. Iran was still attacked, and this caused severe damage to their nuclear facilities, military bases, and leadership. In other words, Iran pursued its nuclear ambitions at the worst possible timing, enough to be considered a threat and become the target of a preemptive strike, but not enough to prevent an attack. And now, the entire foundation of their deterrence strategy has been destroyed. You can't rely on deterrence through proxies if they've already been eliminated or no longer have the ability to fight. And it's clear that the strategy of getting close to, but not actually acquiring, nuclear weapons didn't work either. For Iranian officials now looking at the remains of their own, the lesson is clear. What makes Iran and Venezuela different from countries that Trump has previously threatened but never attacked, like North Korea or Greenland? It's simple. Those countries either have nuclear weapons or are protected by them. Lesson from North Korea and Russia. For Kim Jong-un of North Korea, nuclear weapons are the very guarantee of his regime's survival, and he has no intention of giving them up. Despite the sanctions imposed since 2006, Pyongyang has managed to amass a large number of nuclear weapons, and they continue to improve and expand their arsenal. And most importantly, no one is bombing North Korea. Instead, the world is trying to bring them to the negotiating table. In fact, Kim Jong-un even met with Donald Trump 3 times during his first term. Instead, the highest-ranking official Iran faces in the negotiations is Vice President J.D. Vance, who doesn't have the final decision-making power and still needs to go back to Trump for approval. The lesson here is clear. Under Trump, countries with nuclear weapons are able to get respect from Washington, even if it's reluctantly, just like with its allies France and Britain. Meanwhile, countries without nuclear weapons are often represented only by lower-ranking officials, who also don't have the final say. And this hasn't happened in just one place. This has been repeatedly seen in different parts of the world. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, NATO never directly intervened. Because of the fear of possible escalation against a country with nuclear weapons, Russia continued its brutal war while NATO could only watch. Yes, the West condemned Russia's actions, imposed sanctions, and provided intelligence support, but they did not fight directly. But the fear of nuclear weapons is not one-sided. Instead of intervening directly, NATO poured weapons into Ukraine, reaching approximately 220,000 tons of military aid in 2025 alone. This includes weapons that Putin previously called red lines, such as advanced tanks, HIMARS rocket systems, and Storm Shadow missiles. Russia can clearly see all of this, and it's obvious that they are not pleased. But despite repeated threats from officials like former Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, Russia has never bombed the NATO logistics hub supplying Ukraine. No missiles have hit the cities of Poland. There has been no direct attack on NATO. The only thing they did was engage in gray zone tactics, using cheap drones without warheads. And it stopped immediately when NATO threatened retaliatory action. All of this points to a very simple truth. NATO does not directly intervene against Russia, and Russia does not directly attack NATO either, because both are afraid of nuclear war. Meanwhile, Ukraine, which once had a large inventory of nuclear weapons after the USSR collapsed, but voluntarily gave them all up, has continued to be bombed for more than 4 years. For Iran, while watching all of this, the conclusion is undeniable. Conventional military strength is not enough to deter nuclear powers. International agreements are not enough. Even being an important ally is not enough. The only thing that can stop nuclear powers is another nuclear power. But this understanding, this answer, also brings a new problem. Now, Iran is facing a complicated situation, a strategic bind, according to game theorists. Logically, the best thing for Iran to do is to build a nuclear bomb. But the moment they try to do this, they will almost certainly be discovered. And that discovery could trigger exactly the kind of devastating attack they want to avoid. And it's not that easy to do either. In 2024, the International Atomic Energy Agency estimated that Iran's breakout time, or the time needed to produce enough weapons-grade material for a nuclear bomb, had shortened to just a few weeks or even a few days. But even before the 12-day war and that current campaign, there were events that severely weakened their technical capabilities. After the war began, the Iran War Room estimated that Iran's breakout time had reached between 1 to 3 months. But remember, that's only for producing the materials. The actual process of making a functioning nuclear weapon takes longer and is even more complicated. According to most analysts, instead of just a few months, Iran would now need at least 1 to 2 years to develop a nuclear weapon that can truly be considered a serious threat to their enemies. And during that time, Israeli and American intelligence would have enough time to determine what they are doing. The surveillance system that has long been monitoring Iran's nuclear program is still active. And once any such attempt is discovered, it will almost certainly be followed by a massive attack from Washington and Jerusalem. Enough to fulfill the threat, to send Iran back to the Stone Age. But despite these dangers, the current situation is clearly heading in one direction, pushing Iran toward nuclear weapons. The leadership of Iran saw how North Korea managed to withstand even greater isolation while continuing to strengthen its nuclear arsenal. They also saw how Russia attacked Ukraine while NATO avoided direct involvement in the war. They witnessed how weapons flowed and into Ukraine through Poland to be used against Russian soldiers, while Moscow chose not to attack NATO territory itself. Because of this, from Iran's perspective, it becomes more reasonable to accept the risk in exchange for pursuing nuclear weapons. A simple nuclear device that can be quickly built may not immediately provide perfect deterrence, but it's enough to change the entire strategic balance in the Middle East. Even just one successful nuclear test would force America and Israel to seriously reconsider whether further attacks are worth the risk that comes with it. And for Iran, that would be the best possible outcome. What comes next? If Iran succeeds in developing a nuclear weapon, and remember, that's still a big if because of all the challenges, the impact won't be limited to Iran's own security. This would send a clear message to the whole world that no matter how much pressure there is, building a nuclear bomb is the most effective way to protect a country. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has repeatedly said that if Iran acquires a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia will immediately follow. There are even analysts who believe that Pakistan might help Saudi Arabia because of their long-standing relationship. And it's not just Saudi Arabia that might follow. Experts believe that if this kind of chain reaction starts, Turkey and Egypt might also follow. In 2019, Turkish President Erdogan himself said that there are countries with nuclear missiles, but Turkey is forbidden from having them, something he cannot accept. If Iran acquires nuclear weapons, there is a high possibility that Turkey will use this as a reason to strengthen its own nuclear ambitions. The same thing could possibly happen in the UAE and Egypt. They also want to have nuclear weapons to maintain the balance of power in the region. And once this kind of spread begins, it will be hard to stop. And this won't just happen in the Middle East. According to a survey in April 2025 by the ASAN Institute for Policy Studies, about 76% of South Koreans want to have their own nuclear weapons, the highest number ever recorded. Less than half believe that America would use nuclear weapons to defend them if they were attacked by North Korea. In Japan, even though more than 60% of the population opposes having nuclear weapons, there are high-ranking officials who believe the country should consider it. Although the official insisted that there has not yet been a formal discussion within the government about nuclear weapons, the fact that a high-ranking official can mention this in public is a clear sign of how far the debate has come, and how much worse it could get if the world fully enters a nuclear arms race. We shouldn't just look at the Middle East. In Europe, there are countries like Sweden and Poland that might be forced to join this kind of race. Yes, they are currently under the nuclear deterrence of Britain and France, but there are also leaders who have signaled interest in pursuing their own nuclear program. The president of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, and Jimmy Åkesson, leader of the right-wing Sweden Democrats who supports Ulf Kristersson's government, have previously mentioned the possibility of developing their own nuclear weapons. It's important to clarify that the scenario where countries simultaneously pursue nuclear weapons is a worst-case scenario, and the chances of it happening are low. But it's not zero, and if this does happen, we might witness the largest spread of nuclear weapons since the Cold War. There's a reason why the Non-Proliferation Treaty was created, an agreement that limits the spread of nuclear weapons. Under this, countries without nuclear weapons agree not to develop them, in exchange for access to peaceful nuclear technology and protection from countries with nuclear arsenals. This agreement was designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation, but it hasn't been tested to the extent that could be brought about by a nuclear-armed Iran. Yes, North Korea violated this agreement and faced sanctions, but their influence on the world is limited. Their connection to the global economy is weak, and the threat is focused only on neighboring countries like South Korea, Japan, and American forces in the region. That's why it didn't cause a widespread chain reaction, but it's a different story with Iran. It is located at the crossroads of the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, and Central Asia, a very strategic location. It is surrounded by powerful countries like Turkey and Pakistan. It has influence from Lebanon to Yemen. It has proxy forces that are active in different countries, and most importantly, it has proven that it can block the Strait of Hormuz, a very important route through which about 20% of global oil and natural gas supplies pass. So if Iran acquires nuclear weapons, it won't just change its own security. It will force the entire power calculus in the region to change. It will change the security arrangements in the Middle East, and it could possibly start the very nuclear arms race that the NPT is trying to prevent. The entire balance of power in one of the most turbulent regions in the world will be completely changed. And there's a bitter irony in all of this. The United States and Israel launched their campaign with a clear goal to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. They destroyed the facilities. They assassinated the scientists. They dismantled the leadership and set the program back by several years. But by doing that, they may have actually pushed Iran closer to the very thing they wanted to prevent. Now, Iran faces a clear but dangerous choice. Remain weak and open to further attacks, or pursue the one thing that seems capable of preventing war: nuclear weapons. For Washington and Jerusalem, this is an almost impossible situation. They cannot accept a nuclear-armed Iran, but the steps they took to prevent this may have actually strengthened Iran's decision to pursue it. A new attack might buy some time, but it won't change the root of the problem: the calculation that is pushing Iran toward nuclear weapons. And now, the most important question is this. Will Iran really do it? And if it happens, will the world still be able to stop the rapid spread of nuclear weapons? Thank you very much for watching.